We wanted to start by just sharing a brief, give you guys some context of kind of our backgrounds in regards to relationships, and share our story with you, again, real briefly, but just so you know us and kind of know what kind of experiences we're operating out of. And so Maggie was going to start and share some of her background.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be with you guys tonight. I was thinking, so I was walking in, like, you guys are probably coming into this in a lot of different places, right? Like, there's probably some of you who are really curious, like, what does the Bible say about relationships? Like, I really want to know. Some might have, like, heard talks about relationships before, but I can imagine that in your heart it probably feels like a roller coaster sometimes. I remember that in college, feeling like seasons were like, oh, me and Jesus, we are fine. Like, I'm so content. And then, like, the very next day, it's just a struggle and a wrestle of, like, my desires, my longings and crushes, and what do I do with this? And then also, too, I can imagine there might be some of you guys coming in a little bit fearful. Like, what might God say to me tonight? What might he ask of me? And so, really, our prayer has been that, like, that you guys would, understand the character of our God through this, and that it would set your hearts at rest and show you how to obey, show you how to trust him, teach you how good he is, how much he cares about you, and especially about this area of your life. This is a really precious area in your life, and so therefore it's really precious to the one who created you. So anyway, so excited to be here. And for me, growing up, I feel like my view on relationships actually closely mirrored my view on my grace relationship, which is with the Lord. And high school was kind of this season of exerting a lot of effort spiritually, like trying to do all the right things, but inwardly there just being a gap of, like, understanding his grace. And so there's a lot of unrest and control and trying to understand who I was. And that was also reflected in my relationships towards guys. I feel like I was outwardly putting a lot of effort to look like I was doing all the right things. So, like, this is, like, really old school, but there was this book that circulated around called I Kissed Dating Goodbye. And so I was like, oh yeah, I Kissed Dating Goodbye, I'm reading that. So I was trying to do all the right things, but inwardly... It
was a real spiritual book.
Yeah, it was a real spiritual book.
Not a really healthy book in all regards, but it was a real...
Yeah, I don't know if I'd recommend it, but it looked good, and so I was, outwardly that's who I wanted to be, but inwardly it was a battle, and I just wanted what I wanted, and so therefore I felt like I could manipulate relationships, and I just wanted control. So anyway, that was kind of how I operated out of it. I felt really tight-fisted. It was like... I wasn't a Christian in high school, but I wanted to look like one, and I didn't really know how to trust Jesus with my relationships in high school, but I wanted to look like I did. And so when I met Jesus in college, when he met me and saved me, I feel like it was this understanding of his grace just, like, flooding into my heart. But relationships were still like that area that I just wanted control on. Like, I was afraid to give it to him. I was afraid of what that would look like. I was afraid of letting go. And so that was kind of who I was in high school.
As a result of the relationship, describe your relationships with guys.
Oh, yeah. So I didn't date a lot in high school because I kissed dating goodbye. So, but I had, like, this crush that I just, like, I mean, in every regard it was dating, but because I wanted to look like I was doing the right things, I didn't call it dating. But it was that. And emotionally, my relationships with guys in college were, I didn't quite know how to relate in a way that was helpful to my heart and helpful to their hearts, and so I just jumped in and retrospectively look back and think, man, I wasn't wise. I didn't know how to be wise, and I wasn't wise. And a lot of it, I think my heart underneath it was, like I said, just this reluctance to really trust God with that area of my life. So,
yeah. And for me, if you can't relate with someone who kind of, even if it was for the wrong reasons, kind of like walked in purity all through her life in terms of how she related with the opposite sex, and I guess in terms of physical purity. Starting about 8th grade on, I lived for one thing until I became a Christian, even a few months after I became a Christian, and it was self-gratification. It was the only thing I lived for. And I'm sure there were moments where that would not have been true, but I just think of one of my biggest regrets. People say you shouldn't have regrets. Like, I have literally hundreds of regrets from high school, and it was how I viewed women. And I had some kind of moral boundaries that, even though I wasn't a Christian, I kind of heard you probably shouldn't cross those moral boundaries. But dozens and dozens of relationships over those years because I was in pursuit of one thing, which was self-gratification. And I used people. I manipulated them emotionally. And so when I became a Christian in college, this idea of physical purity and emotional purity and thinking for marriage and my future was an entirely new paradigm for me. And so Maggie's going to unpack it from there, our story.
Okay, we'll chime in too.
I'll chime in.
All right.
Okay.
All right. So Brett and I went to different colleges, and we actually met our freshman year in college. His best friend went to college with me, where I went to at Furman, and we went to a concert. And Brett came in town. He was like 2 hours away. He came in town to hang out with his best friend, and we met at a concert. I have a vague memory of it. But the guy I went to the concert with was Brett's best friend from high school. And he and I kind of like, again, quasi-dated, like trying to look like I was trying to do all the right things because I didn't know what I was doing, but kind of dated his best friend, and that was his best friend. And so Brett would kind of come in town sometimes, and we would all hang out together. And
I'd come in town to hang out with my best friend.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Maggie and him were dating.
Mm-hmm.
And I had just become a Christian during my freshman year, and so I would AOL Instant Messenger with Dan, my best friend. This was right when it came out, and we'd be chatting. And I had just become a Christian. Dan had been sharing the gospel with me for years in high school, and I finally became a Christian in college. And he started dating Maggie, and this is what Dan said. He said, "I want to date this girl." At this point, I didn't know who she was. "I want to date this girl in such a way that if she were to marry my best friend, I could stand at the wedding and not have any regrets." So that was what he typed, or I don't know if we're on the phone or if he AOL instant messaged me. But as you can imagine, for some of you, maybe that's even still shocking, as a brand new believer who never had a paradigm of relationships that included purity and thinking about marriage, as I mentioned, that was like a shocking statement. Like, wait, what? Like thinking through all the implications of that. In terms of the physical purity, the emotional purity. And he was talking about Maggie, so
yeah,
pick it up from there.
Yeah, so I became a Christian the summer after my freshman year, and would see Brett every so often, but we really got to know each other the summer after our junior year, and we worked for a church. We worked for their high school youth group. And so that summer we spent a lot of time together, and I remember...
You're not dating Dan at this point.
Oh yeah, I wasn't dating Dan. Yeah, that really kind of ended. I'm so sorry. That's a big detail that I forgot. So yeah, I wasn't dating Dan. Hanging out with Brett. Dan and I had been dating for a while, but we were hanging out, and I just remember like admiring Brett from afar. You know, like we were doing a lot of things, and I just remember watching his character, watching how he loved people. And just thinking...
My physical strength.
All that stuff. And I think, and for me, it was just kind of like, I really think I like this guy, but I don't know what to do. Like, I've never done this well, and I'm so afraid of blowing it. And so we got to know each other that summer.
Yeah, so the same things. I'm watching Maggie. She's giving her life away to women. She's helping them walk with God. And I'm like, golly. I remember the first time we hung out, like kind of formally, I asked her testimony, and she shared this story and her love for Jesus. And I just remember thinking that during that interaction, I don't know what this means in terms of our future, but I know that Maggie just set the bar way up here for any other woman I'll ever interact with in terms of thinking about, relationships. And so we, we're ministering to two kind of separate groups of people in the same vicinity, getting to know each other, spending some time together. We went on a mission trip and served kind of, again, in the same vicinity. By the end of the summer, I'm crushing hard. It's like, I think I really like this girl, but I can't get a read on her. And she's a little mysterious. I think she kind of likes me because, there's some, when that happens, you're kind of like, it kind of seems like she likes me, but so we sit down at the end of the summer before we're wrapping up our internships at a lake house at a retreat we were on with the youth group we're working with, and I have the what's that acronym? Determine the DTR. Define the relationship. Sorry, DTR. It escaped me for a second, and I'm like, here's kind of what I'm thinking and feeling, but this may be not on the same page that you're on, and she basically said, yeah, I'm not on that page with you. That's literally all I remember from that night.
It's a little confusing of a conversation.
So you can imagine, you think this is going to be it. You're going into your senior year of college. You're really attracted to this person. You love this person's character. You think maybe this is God. And so you think she kind of likes you, and you're about to have the conversation, and she essentially says very kindly, just totally like devastating for me. And so anyway, we go back to college, our senior year.
Yeah, we go back to college. So I liked Brett, but again, I was like, I've like blown it in this area. I have no idea what to do. So that's why I was like, oh, I don't. So yeah, so Brett got the impression that I wasn't into him, which I was.
Because you said.
Well, I'm in a relationship dog. No, so we went back to college, and I was like, crap, I really like Brett. What have I done? You remember distinctly, I had this old Volvo station wagon, like driving on my station wagon, being like, I think I'm going to call him. We actually had a cell phone there.
That was the first year I had a cell phone. That's right.
Oh, we're really not that old. But driving and thinking, I'm going to call him. I'm going to tell him exactly how I feel. I'm going to like make this right. So this was a huge moment for me because this was like, I'm going to fix this. Like, I'm going to make this right. And I remember God like speaking to me like, Maggie, I can do this. Like, if I want this for you, I can do it. And it was just like this moment. It was huge for me. I mean, 3 years of like trying to love Jesus and offer in this area. And it was like, okay, I can trust you. Like, I'm not going to try to make this happen. I'm not going to like, come running back and, well, come running too. So, anyway, so that was really huge for me personally. So that was our senior year, fall of our senior year. Do what?
Yeah, let's pause there. We'll come back.
And we'll come back to it. Do you want to talk about that? Oh, no, I guess that's
it. So we'll come back to the end of the story. You guys obviously know how it turned out. But what qualifies us to give this talk? Well, not a whole lot in terms of how we related to one another. But I will say this. This is our like 13th or something year working with students now. And we have been around, we were counting this up, we have either officiated or been in 22 weddings combined. Okay, so here's a picture of a few. I don't know where it is. Here it is. Oh, there's our. Well, that's the end of the story. We'll get to that later. That was our wedding day. So you recognize some of these folks. Here's Cam on his wedding day with Lise. Here's Mike on his wedding day, looking confused. Some other friends of ours, some of them you might recognize. Julian moved out to St. Louis with us and is now in seminary, and some other friends. Not only that, but our daughters have been in a handful of these weddings too. So here's Ellie and Lise. That's one of our favorite pictures ever right there. She was a ring girl, right? Or a flower girl. I mean, this is a joy when you're officiating a wedding and you're seeing your 3 or 4 year old come up the aisle is a real treat, and it makes you cry. And then recently we have inducted a new Barnes family member into the wedding. Did you add that one? Yeah, so he was the last wedding, the Brewers, and Taylor got to be in her first wedding and walked Tommy the wrong direction, but eventually got to the front of the room. She was really proud of it, as you can tell. And so not much qualifies us to give this talk outside of the grace of God and the fact that we have gotten to see this happen. And when I say this, I mean like healthy relationships come to like a beautiful culmination at a wedding ceremony dozens of times now. We have also seen the whole spectrum. We've also been at weddings where part of our hearts were so saddened because we thought, what's going to happen here? We've seen marriages crumble. We've seen them done really badly. And now at our age, we've seen a handful of marriages around us fall apart and end in divorce 2, 3, 5, 6 years into it. But we've also seen God really unite two people in unique and special ways, and God really use their marriages in powerful ways for His kingdom, and just beautiful pictures of love. And so that's what qualifies us to give this talk, and we hope that many of you will have the same kind of experience as we submit these things to God. And even as Brian was talking the other night about work, and he mentioned this, and I thought it was really helpful, this is one of those categories that are so critical, and we spend so little time thinking about how to do it well in a way that would honor God. So I know for some of you, this will be the very first moment you've actually ever even thought about it. And for others of you, you need to revisit it again, like I needed to revisit it again. And so I hope that God would use it. Our goals are threefold. First is this. As you're learning this summer, we want to honor the Lord with every aspect of our life. With every aspect of our life. Just again, are all these passages? Grab the note card. Go ahead and flip in your Bible to that verse. We're going to have you guys read a lot of this scripture, so we're not flipping around a whole lot up here. Whoever is sitting on Galatians, and if there's a card next to you that's not in use, grab that one too. Galatians 2:20, or pass cards up. I don't care. Trade them. Galatians 2:20. Will someone read that loudly? Who's got Galatians 2:20? Over here, Elise.
I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. In the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me.
The life I now live in the flesh, I live in faith. My life has been crucified. Self is no longer. It is Christ who lives in me. I love that paradigm. I wish I understood it in all areas of life, but maybe tonight will help. Who has 1 Corinthians 10:31, another familiar passage? Go ahead.
So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God.
Yeah. And so the question we would have with this goal, is this the core desire of your heart? That in everything you do, you would do it for the glory of God. Again, that is one of those lofty statements that we will spend the rest of our life pursuing and only catching glimpses of it. But is that the core desire of your heart? I know that some of you possibly could be entering into thinking about a category like this, and for some reason, because the nature of this category, unlike maybe work in future, you're holding on to it a little bit tighter because there's emotions attached, there's history attached, there's baggage, there's fear, there's control. But what we would like to start is ask you that question: is the core desire of your heart in all categories of your life that it would be lived for the Lord, that it would be in service to Him, to exalt Him? Do the second, or am I doing all those? Or
No, I can do it.
Okay.
All right, the second goal we have is that we want to help you guys see and believe that God's ways are not begrudging, but beautiful and beneficial. So to see and believe that God's ways are not begrudging, but beautiful and beneficial. I feel like Brett kind of hit on this in his lordship talk of that we have a benevolent dictator. He kind of talked about it, but just that God's commands are good, that they're beautiful. No matter how much they might conflict with culture, which is the rub, right? Like it's like feels like this is. We see how this is done in one area. Can we really trust what God says, even though we haven't maybe seen it as much as we see it all around us? So to help us all trust that, I feel like we want to point you guys to the character of God. The first verse is 2 Samuel 12:7-8. Before it's read, just the context of it is David has really blown it in this passage. This is after he committed adultery with Bathsheba, killed her husband. I mean, he's in a really bad spot, okay? And so I just want you guys, if you can imagine how God might respond to that, like when we hear that, if you can kind of imagine, man, God must have been mad. Like, that's bad. This is when Nathan comes back. Nathan is the prophet. He comes to David, and this is what he tells him in light of what he's just done. So it's 2 Samuel 12:7-8. Do I have it? Yeah.
Nathan said to David, "You are the man. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel. I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you out of the hand of Saul. I gave you your master's house and your master's wives into your arms, and gave you the house of Israel and Judah. And if this were too little, I would add to you as much more."
So I love the heart of God in that. You know, it's like, David, I would have given you more. You know, like, if you would have asked, I would have given you more. It's not this God that's withholding, but a God that's just abundant. So that's how we want to see God and what in His ways in this area. The other passage is Psalm 16:11. Does anybody have that one? Yeah.
You make known to me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore.
Yeah. So you make known to me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. And I love this. We're talking about the God who created love, who created relationship, who created sex. Like, this is who we're talking about. Mm-hmm. That He's a good God. And that we can trust what he has to say about those areas. So
Yeah, that's great. Third goal is to see and understand the glories and the dangers of relationships. Glories and dangers of relationships. We have a picture here of our campsite from last week. This is going to blow your mind. That was our motorhome. We drove that thing around for 7 days. It's not ours. We rented it. I don't know if I ever really actually want to own one, but it was fun for 7 days. And we would make campfires at a few of our campsites. And as we got to thinking about relationships are a lot like fire. Oh, you're going to do here. Maggie's going to tell you the first way they're a lot like fire.
first way is, so this campfire, it would get a little cool at night, so we'd gather around the campfire. So fire is good, right? Like it was giving us warmth. And so as we're talking about this, so fire. How are we living this?
So it provides warmth in the sense is that in so many ways, relationships reflect the goodness of God's original design. They do. To be known, to be loved, to be able to serve another person selflessly, to be a guidepost of truth to another person for companionship, laughter, enjoyment of experiences. Like relationships, there's a glory to relationships. It's part of God's design. In the same sense, though, fires can also be very dangerous, right? if misused. And so because of the fall, relationships have been twisted. Satan, the prince of the air, in Ephesians 2 says, the spirit that is now work in the sons of disobedience, he twists and influences the world's norms, and his aim is always to steal and kill and destroy. He's done that in the way we think about relationships. So this is a critical topic. I'm not going to ask any of you to raise your hands at all, but how many of you are still being negatively affected by a failed relationship? Either your own or your parents, or some connection to a failed relationship that's had a very massive effect on you. And so you see just the weightiness of this topic. It's such a beautiful aspect of God's original design, but also such a dangerous reality because of the fall. And I think Satan knows that. So what we're going to do tonight, during the rest of our time together, very briefly here during our first talk, is deconstruct the world's way of viewing relationships. Okay? When you're looking to maybe renovate a house, as we did our very first house, sometimes houses are in such decrepit shape that the best way to rebuild it is just to tear it down to its foundation and start all over again. And we really believe that in one sense, relationships, in terms of how the world thinks and views relationships, is just decrepit. And so what we want to do tonight is deconstruct kind of the world's paradigm for how to pursue or how to be in relationship with another person. And so, does someone have Proverbs 14:12 for us? Go ahead, Dakota.
There's a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death.
Yeah, it's end leads. There's a way that seems right to man. It seems right, makes sense. Everybody else seems to be thinking along the same lines, but its end leads to death. And so the blanks there are you aware of the world's lies? Are you aware of the world's lies? And that's how we want to deconstruct the world's way of dating, is to reveal its lies. I don't know if any of you have someone like this in your life. I do. Who's just a liar or an exaggerator or an embellisher in every area of life. And so the first few times you were lied to, you think, that's odd. And then you start to realize that, wait a second, this is just how this person thinks. He doesn't think in light of reality at all. And you start to lose trust. We're kind of hoping to do that tonight with the world's way of viewing relationships, is just to kind of keep showing you some of the lies that it's told you in hopes that you'll lose trust in it altogether. That's our hope. And we actually want you asking this question at the end of these next few minutes. So how do we do it then? What's a good way to do it? If we don't do it this way, how do we do it? Okay, so in order to understand where these lies are coming from, we need to agree on a social norm for dating. And I think in our culture, again, this is a generalization, there's kind of two cultural trends in relationships. And I think you guys would probably affirm this. I'm sure it's more complex than this. But in general, you've got the hookup culture, right? You've got the hookup culture, which is, full of one-night type deals or party deals, or the enjoyment of kind of self-gratification with none of the commitment. And so some of you guys have been exposed to that or been a part of that in different ways. And I think the other major trend in our culture is what we're going to call casual, exclusive dating. Write that term down. Casual, exclusive dating. And I think most of us in this room would hear the idea of like the hookup culture, like that paradigm for relationship. And I'm assuming that everyone in this room internally kind of cringes at that. Especially if you're in Christ, it's like, gosh, what a sad way to think and use and manipulate another person. And so we're not going to spend a ton of time on that, because I don't think that's where you are. What we are going to spend some time on is this idea of casual, exclusive dating. And to define that for you, here's how I want to break it down. It's casual. There's no idea if it's actually leading anywhere or not. There's no time frame. There's no understanding that this is preparing us for marriage. This is preparing us for like a covenant commitment to one another. It's just casual. We're just hanging out. I mean, no, we're not thinking about marriage, or no, we don't even really have any really kind of time frame for marriage. If we are thinking we might marry that person, we're just with this person. So it's casual. Did I explain that right?
Yeah, no, just saying, just like
Yeah. And it's exclusive. And what I mean by that is that it's viewing the other person as a possession, in the sense that that person is mine. And if that person showed up at a party or at an event with another person, that wouldn't even enter into your understanding of what this relationship is. Basically, it's a miniature marriage without the covenant, without the marriage. Right? So we're calling this casual, exclusive dating. This can be a dangerous trend because it's feeding you lies without even knowing it. And so let's look at lie number one. Lie number one is this. This is what casual exclusive dating feeds you as a lie. There is no consequences in dating. There's no consequences. I don't think that if you actually process this, any of you would actually believe that, because many of you in this room have experienced the consequences of this kind of dating, right? You offer yourself up emotionally. You maybe offer yourself up physically. The relationship ends, and there's deep pain, there's deep regret, there's deep shame attached to it. So most of us in this room, I would imagine, probably not all, but most of us have experienced some of the consequences of this kind of form of relating to one another. The hurt, the corrosion of trust, the loss of time that you could have given to other things, the guilt and shame for how you treated the others or allowed others to treat you. And here's why there are consequences attached to it. And I already mentioned this, but just to say it a little bit differently, it's not marriage, but it's acting like you're married. And biblically, there is a sacredness to marriage. So you don't play, when something is sacred, like truly sacred, you don't play with it. You don't play with God's design for it. But we've played with it. And what this casual exclusive dating does, it opens the door for us to enter into a relationship with no commitment, but in hopes of all the benefits that commitment, that this should be based on a commitment. This creates a breeding ground for physical and emotional impurity, which equals consequences. And what I used to do on the campuses back in the day to illustrate this is I would get my daughter's Play-Doh. And you guys remember the Play-Doh days? Maybe some of you are babysitters, and you get one color of Play-Doh, and you get a kid playing with two separate colors, and they start mashing the Play-Doh together, right? And then with Play-Doh, as they're twisting it together, I remember my daughters used to get upset because when we pulled it apart, it's like they wanted their orange and their purple separate, but you've twisted it apart, so there's no way it will ever get to the point ever again where there is an orange Play-Doh and a purple Play-Doh. It's just now orange and purple swirl. That's what's occurred with the Play-Doh. This is what happens with our life. Like, we intermingle with another person emotionally, we intermingle with another person spiritually, physically, and there's no way it's going back to what it was before that happened. There's no way. So when that Play-Doh is separated, part of you is lost, part of that person is now attached to you, and we're going to get to this at the end. And so God is gracious and redeems and restores. But this is a reality for most of us. there's consequences attached. You've lost part of yourself. You've attached another person to you in some ways, and memories and ways of thinking or ways of relating and trusting that are going to take probably years for God to slowly unravel and pick the pieces of Play-Doh out again, until one day, it's a terrible way to say it, we're that pure piece of Play-Doh. Right? We're all looking forward to that day. So. Yep.
Line number 2 is that relationships equal happiness and contentment. Relationship equals happiness and contentment. When we talk about casual exclusive dating, most often, it's motivated by discontentment and insecurity. So we want something. There's something lacking within us that we're looking for to be filled in somebody else. And don't believe this lie. If you are discontent as a single person, then you will be discontent as a married person. It's really true. Discontentment is not a horizontal thing. It's a vertical thing, primarily. And we know from even what we read about that Psalm 16:11 passage, we know that the fullness of joy is in God's presence. That joy and contentment come from Him. And so that's what we want to really hit on, is that this relationship, though you're looking for it to fill those things, it can't. It was never meant to fill that. God made you for a relationship with Him, to be filled by Him in that way. 1 Corinthians 7, Paul's kind of speaking to this, and he's speaking to the unmarried and to the married people, and this passage specifically talks about to the unmarried. And it's really interesting. I'd love for you guys to hear it, because I feel like when I read it, it just resonates. I feel that, and I remember that so clearly. So does anybody have 1 Corinthians 7, 32 through 35?
I want you to be free from anxieties. The unmarried man is anxious about the things of the Lord, how to please the Lord. But the married man is anxious about worldly things, how to please his wife, and his interests are divided. And the unmarried or betrothed woman is anxious about the things of the Lord, how to be holy in body and spirit. But the married woman is anxious about worldly things, how to please her husband. I say this for you, for your own benefit, not to lay any restraint upon you, but to promote good order and to secure your undivided devotion to the Lord.
I love that, your undivided devotion to the Lord. I feel like that. I remember in college I read a book called Passion and Purity by Elizabeth Elliot, which is a really great book. I don't know if you have it in the library now, but it's an awesome book. And it was really paradigm shifting for me, because I kind of viewed singleness as like, you just push through singleness. Because when you're married, that's really when when happiness and contentment, when all that's happening. And so, but it was really shifting to read Elizabeth Elliot. She talked a lot about singleness as being a gift. And I was like, oh, goodness, I've never thought about it like that. And as I was in college and started to process that, I started to realize, like, I may never have this season again. I don't know what the Lord has for me, but this is an amazing season where it's just me and Jesus. And there's such a beauty of that, you guys. Like, Paul is right, like an undivided heart, to be able to fight for an undivided heart with Jesus. And that's where you guys are right now. And even in this place, it's like all these things are helping towards that undivided heart, towards the Lord. Psalm 86:11 has a prayer, and the psalmist prays, like, give me an undivided heart that I might fear your name. I remember that was one of my pocket verses. I had like these 3x5 cards, and during college, like I said, I feel like singleness was a struggle, and sometimes it felt like, oh, I'm so content. Most of the time it felt like, this is really hard. I really want a relationship. So I'd have pocket verses, and a lot of them were from the Psalms, but just reminding me of who God was, because I just needed it. I needed to be reminded. That was one of my pocket verses that I liked. So Elizabeth Elliot has a great quote. Like I said, I really love Elizabeth Elliot. We named Ellie after Elizabeth Elliot. But this is what she says. She says, the secret is Christ in me, not me in a different set of circumstances. So I'll say it again because I love it so much. The secret is Christ in me, not me in a different set of circumstances. So this is the consequence we want to fight again. That if I'm in a relationship, then I will be happy. You know this if it's always in your mind that if only this guy knows me, or if only this guy started to like me, or if only this girl, whatever, paid attention to me, then I would be happy. So that's what we want to fight for with you guys, is for contentment where you guys are, to really view this time as a gift. And another thing Brett and I have talked about is just how much, even as we reflect on college, but often what we see is so much time, valuable time, is wasted that you could be growing in your walk with the Lord, loving others, pursuing friendships, but it's wasted in worry and anxiety, like that passage was talking about over this area. So, it's a real consequence.
I was just thinking, too, it's such a subtle lie because it's true. We think that happiness and contentment are going to be found in a relationship because we know that happiness and contentment are found through being loved and loving someone else. And so we get it. I know that you guys get that. It's like, yeah, but when I am loved, when I'm in that kind of a relationship, that's some of the happiest moments, you know. The trick is realizing that you are loved. You really are loved. And you really are in a relationship, like of the most intimate sort with your Creator. You know, and so for us to get into the paradigm of that being where we find our happiness and contentment in the relationship, as Maggie said, in the vertical relationship with the Lord. The third lie is this: dating will prepare me for marriage. And what I would just add as a nuance to that is, in a way to correct it, is not if it's done incorrectly. So dating done well will prepare you for marriage. We're going to talk about that here in a few minutes after our break. But dating done incorrectly will not prepare you for marriage. In fact, it will do the opposite. And the statistics speak for themselves, right? Like now inside of the church in the U.S., the divorce rate is over 50%. So in case you haven't processed that statistic, what you need to get from that statistic, or at least one thing you get from that statistic, is we're doing something wrong in our preparing for relationships. There's also an enemy that wants to destroy that relationship, but we are doing something wrong in the way we think about relationships. If half of the relationships that end up in marriage end up failing. If you're dating, if your dating is motivated by selfish desires, okay, self-fulfillment, self-gratification, companionship, physical intimacy, wanting to feel more secure from another person, wanting acceptance for yourself from another person, if your dating is motivated by a selfish desire, which takes some heart searching, then it cannot be preparing you for marriage, because marriage is built on selflessness and sacrifice. So if you're pursuing a relationship, a dating relationship, and core to that is self-gratification in some form, security, intimacy, acceptance, whatever it might be, then by its very nature, it cannot be preparing you for the selfless calling that biblical marriage is. Does that make sense? The last lie that we have, I'm sure there's more, but we're trying to take a wrecking ball to this casual exclusive dating. I hope we're on our last few bricks, or maybe the sink is still standing in your kitchen. We just need to knock that last pipe over. Two Christians make a godly relationship. Or another way I've heard it spun is two dating Christians make it God's will. Because she's a Christian, because I'm a Christian, therefore it must be a healthy thing. Or he or she says that they're a Christian, so it's okay. And we use dating often, we use this language often to justify ever having to seek out God's will on this. We use God versus seeking God. What we want is those desires I just mentioned, acceptance, intimacy, whatever. And so we use God talk and God language to get it. Right? Well, that person's a Christian. Or it's God's will because that person's a Christian. Rather than ever deeply and desperately seeking God's will. These relationships, when they have kind of these Christian titles on it, when casual exclusive dating enters into like Christian culture and we start using language like, well, two Christians make it a godly relationship, can be the most dangerous because they claim to reflect Christ, but they don't. They don't. And so, never even give a second thought to having sleepovers together, isolating yourself from the rest of the body of Christ, unfounded ownership over another person that you've made no covenant commitment to, hindrances to one another's growth and walk with God, impurities like abounding impurities in the relationship. But that person's a Christian, I'm a Christian. So it must be God's will for us to be in this type of relationship with one another. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. As kind of a weird place as it is to pause, we're going to pause. That's heavy. And what we're going to do, again, I'm hoping that the house is leveled. We've got a cement foundation now. And what we're going to do is dig into God's Word. You notice there that I think we did like 4 or 5 of our verses, and the rest of you have note cards. So what we're about to do is start putting together some biblical principles in the hopes of getting you started in the right direction of building a healthier paradigm for what it looks like to be in a relationship with others. So that's where we're going. So don't lose hope. We are going to like give some instruction as well that we hope resonates with you as well. But let me pray, because I know that's heavy. And we'll take a break. And let's just take a 10-minute break, and we'll start back up. Father, just talking about all this again makes me just hate the world and its lies, and how much destruction we've all experienced because of the deceit. God, I think about everything I see on TV, everything I hear, everything I see on the campus and around me, and it all points to sad, unhealthy realities, and it feels overwhelming almost to consider them again, as I'm sure some of these students are feeling. But like a piercing light through a storm cloud, your truth just resonates deeply. We know it's good. We know it's right. We know we were created for the beauty of your truth. And so I pray by just the work of your Spirit, and as we lean heavily upon the grace of God, you begin to rebuild something for us and set us free in some ways. And we need your help. So we ask for it. We pray this in Jesus' name.